the Omega took down half his warriors. Now the Alpha King demands she be brought to him alive. The sun had barely risen over the jagged peaks of the northern mountains, yet the battlefield already burned with smoke and steel. Half of the Alpha King's warriors lay scattered across the frozen ground, their banners torn and their armor dented. Amid the chaos moved a lone figure, a woman whose presence seemed almost unreal. She was both a shadow and a storm. The soldiers whispered her name, but none dared speak it aloud. The Omega. She moved with precision, striking with the speed of a striking serpent, her eyes sharp as knives. One by one, the Alpha's warriors fell, caught in her traps, her clever maneuvers, or simply her will. She was smaller than most of them, weaker in build, but something about her made them hesitate.
Fear, respect,
Wonder. From the highest ridge, the Alpha King watched. His dark cloak billowed in the wind, his crown glinting in the first light of dawn. He was a man forged by conquest, feared across the kingdoms, a ruler whose word was law and whose wrath was swift. Yet, as he looked down at the battlefield, he felt a flicker of something he did not expect. Intrigue. Half his army, his pride, his strength, had been reduced to nothing by one woman. And still, she moved with calm confidence, untouched, unafraid. He clenched his fist, the gold rings on his fingers digging into his palm. "Bring her to me," he said, his voice low, carrying over the winds. "Alive! I will see her! Alive!" The words left a taste of both command and curiosity. The Alpha had not been denied like this before, and something told him that this Omega would not be caught easily. The Omega paused near a shattered barricade, breathing steadily. Her dark hair was streaked with frost and blood, but her eyes burned brighter than any fire. She looked over the battlefield, surveying her handiwork. There was no joy in it, only necessity. She had not come here for glory. She had come for justice. Her clan had been destroyed by the Alpha's army years ago. Families, homes, memories, all taken in one brutal night. She had survived by cunning, by hiding, by learning to strike when the moment was right. And now, here she was, standing in the ruins of what had once been a thriving army. She had proven herself, but she knew this was only the beginning. The wind whispered through the mountains, carrying with it the faint sound of footsteps. She stiffened, senses sharpening. Wolves of steel and shadow moved in the distance, scouts, likely sent to track her. She smiled faintly. They thought they could hunt her like prey. They would soon learn how wrong they were. In the throne hall far below, the Alpha King's council argued. Generals and advisors crowded the golden room, tension written on every face. "She cannot be allowed to escape," one general insisted, his voice harsh. "She is a threat to the kingdom. We must capture her at all costs." The Alpha King remained silent, standing near the balcony. His dark eyes were fixed on the horizon where the forest and mountains met. He did not speak because he did not need to. His presence alone silenced them, yet within him a storm brewed. This Omega had not only humiliated his army, she had awakened a spark of fascination he could not quell.
She is clever, he finally said, his voice smooth but sharp.
She's dangerous, and she must be brought to me, alive. Understand? The generals nodded, though hesitation lingered. It was not fear of his command. They feared what she might do if they failed. The Omega moved through the ruined landscape with careful steps. Each movement was deliberate, calculated. She had survived countless hunts before, but none like this. She could feel the Alpha King's eyes on her even from afar, his presence like a shadow she could not shake. He would not stop until he had her. That was certain. Yet there was more than danger in his pursuit. She felt a strange pull, something that twisted in her chest, and whispered of connection, of fate, of power she did not fully understand. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. Feelings were a luxury she could not afford. Survival came first. She disappeared into the forest that edged the battlefield, the trees towering and dark, their branches clawing at the sky. The forest was ancient, whispered to be alive with magic, older than kings and kingdoms. Few dared enter, and fewer returned. She knew it well. The shadows bent to her will, hiding her movements, confounding those who tried to follow. The Alpha King followed, not through the forest itself, but along the ridges above. He observed her from a distance, studying her as one might study a rare animal, dangerous, intelligent, and magnificent. He had commanded legions, faced traitors, and seen kingdoms fall. Yet there was something about this woman that unsettled him. Something that made him want not only to conquer her, but also to understand her. The wind carried her scent to him, faint but unmistakable. It spoke of fire and determination, of loss and vengeance, of a soul that had endured far more than most could imagine. He found himself tightening his grip on his sword, though not to attack. He had no intention of entering the forest blindly. This was a test, and he would pass it, as he always did. Night fell, though the forest never truly allowed darkness to settle. The trees whispered secrets, the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet, and the wind carried voices she could almost understand. She paused beside a small clearing, kneeling briefly to touch a circle of stones etched with runes. Her fingers traced the patterns, murmuring words older than memory. The stones glowed faintly, a protective barrier forming around her. She stood, her silhouette framed by the ghostly light. If the Alpha King entered the forest, he would find not just a woman, but a force that could challenge even him. Somewhere above he paused, sensing the shift in the air. His hand brushed the hilt of his sword, but he did not move forward. Not yet. The forest itself seemed to acknowledge her power, and he realized that brute force alone would not bring her to him. He would have to match her in cunning, patience, and, though he did not yet admit it, will. The Omega did not rest. She moved deeper into the forest, past twisted roots and shadows that seemed to follow her. Memories of her past whispered to her in every rustle of leaves. The screams of her family, the cries of her people, the day the Alpha's army came. Anger flared within her, but she forced it down. Anger alone would not save her. Strategy, intelligence, and a calm heart would. Yet even as she moved, she felt it. The shadow behind her. The presence of the Alpha King. She could not see him, but she knew he was near, not just near, but focused entirely on her. Every instinct screamed that he would not rest until he had her. And in that knowledge a strange thrill ran through her, a dangerous, unspoken acknowledgement that fate had brought them together. Back at the ridges, the Alpha King spoke softly to the wind, almost as if he were speaking to her directly. "You are clever," he said, voice low and even. "Too clever for your own good, but you will not escape me. Not forever." The words were both a warning and a promise. He had faced kings and monsters, armies and sorcery, yet this Omega challenged him in a way no one ever had. He did not yet understand why, and perhaps he feared the answer. Hours passed. The moon rose high, casting silver light over the forest. The Omega reached a small river, its waters cold and swift. She paused to drink, kneeling at the edge, listening. The forest was alive with whispers, some warnings, some encouragement, some secrets of those who had walked these paths before. Then, a shadow flickered across the water. Not a wolf, not a bird, but a human figure, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with confidence and quiet authority. She stiffened, her hand reaching instinctively for a dagger at her belt. The Alpha King stepped from the shadows, his cloak blending with the night. His eyes met hers across the river, dark and unwavering. For the first time, neither moved to strike. They simply looked, measuring each other, understanding that this encounter would define both of their fates. "You survived," he said quietly, though there was no triumph in his voice. "Only curiosity. Only the first thread of respect." "I always survive," she replied, her voice steady, though her pulse quickened. "You will not catch me so easily." He studied her, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. "Perhaps," he said, "but I will not stop trying. You are mine to find." "Alive!" Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of both defiance and recognition passing between them. They were enemies, hunters, survivors, yet something deeper stirred in the space between them. Without another word, she vanished into the forest once more, leaving him standing by the river, staring after her. The night was silent, but the air between them burned with promise, danger, and fate. And somewhere deep in the mountains, the wind carried his voice after her, soft but resolute. "I will find you. Alive or not, I will find you!" The forest swallowed the Omega, its ancient trees twisting toward the sky like blackened fingers. Moonlight barely touched the ground, and the air smelled of moss and earth, damp and alive. Every sound was amplified, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the whisper of distant creatures, but she moved like a shadow, silent and deliberate. She knew these woods better than most. They were a living labyrinth, dangerous to all but her. She paused, crouched behind a gnarled root, listening. Footsteps approached, deliberate and heavy. Not ordinary soldiers, these were scouts, trained to track even the most careful prey. Her hand found the hilt of her dagger, but she did not move. Instead, she waited. The scouts passed, unaware of the trap she had set. A fallen branch shifted beneath one of them, sending him stumbling into a pit hidden beneath the leaves. Panic erupted in his companions, but the Omega was already gone, a whisper of shadow among the trees. She allowed herself a small smile. They would learn soon enough. She was no ordinary prey. Above, the Alpha King watched from a ridge, his eyes dark pools of focus. He had sent only a small party of his best trackers into the forest, preferring to study her from a distance. This was not a mere hunt. It was a test, for him as much as for her. He had faced armies, monsters, even curses, but nothing had challenged him in this way. The forest itself seemed to resist his advance. Shadows shifted unnaturally, paths looped back on themselves, and whispers, soft, almost like voices, reached his ears. He frowned, brushing his fingers along the hilt of his sword. He could feel her presence, faint but unbroken. She was clever, resourceful, and relentless, and he was determined to match her at every turn. Yet beneath his command a new emotion stirred, curiosity. He did not yet understand why, but there was something about her that called to him, that pricked at the part of himself he had long hidden behind armor and authority. The Omega pressed deeper into the forest, following the winding path that only she could navigate. She moved with purpose, yet her mind raced. She could sense the Alpha King's pursuit, not his soldiers, but him. The shadow behind her, the weight of his presence, felt heavier than any blade. She had survived many dangers, but this was different. She remembered her clan, lost to his army. She remembered the night fire swallowed her home, the screams echoing in her ears. She had learned to fight, to hide, to survive. But she had also learned caution. She could not let herself be captured. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance to turn the tide. Still, despite her resolve, she felt something she had never felt before. A flicker of curiosity. Who was this man who commanded armies yet did not follow his soldiers blindly? Who was this Alpha King who seemed as much a shadow in the woods as she was? She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. Feelings were dangerous, especially now. Hours passed. The forest grew darker, the trees denser. Strange lights flickered in the distance, will-o'-the-wisps perhaps, or remnants of old magic lingering in the air. She kept moving, careful to avoid them, sensing the forest's watchful presence. Suddenly, a rustle to her left. She spun, dagger raised, eyes sharp. A figure stepped out, a scout, alone, trembling. His hands shook as he raised a small torch. "Please!" he whispered, voice cracking. I don't want to die!" The Omega's gaze softened briefly. This was not her enemy. She flicked her dagger lightly, cutting the rope he carried, and pushed him toward the path leading out of the forest.
"No," she said.
"Leave this place. Tell your king I warned him." The scout ran, stumbling through the trees, while the Omega watched, her breath steady. She could not afford to be distracted, not even for mercy. She had a mission, and that mission was survival, and perhaps something more that she dared not name. Above the forest, the Alpha King observed silently. He had watched the exchange from a ridge, noting her movements, her choices. The forest seemed alive, bending to her will, yet he could see her limitations. Every action she took revealed not only skill but also a pattern, an intelligence he recognized from his own kind. He stepped down into the shadows, moving with quiet precision. Unlike his soldiers, he did not rely solely on brute strength. He relied on observation, patience, and understanding. He could feel the pulse of the forest, the faint traces of her path and the pull of destiny that tied them together, and he did not yet fear her. He admired her. The night deepened. The forest's strange magic twisted around them, paths shifting, shadows growing longer. The Omega stopped near a small clearing, a pool of water reflecting the moonlight. She knelt beside it, tracing her fingers across the surface, creating ripples that danced across the reflection of the stars. She whispered words in an ancient tongue, the language of her ancestors. The water shimmered, and for a moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. She was not merely surviving, she was preparing. The Alpha King might follow her, but he would not be ready for what she had become. A rustle behind her. She spun, dagger raised, and froze. The Alpha King stood there, dark and commanding, his eyes fixed on her. He had not come with soldiers. He had not come to fight. He had come to watch, to study, to test. "You move well," he said, voice low, carrying over the stillness of the night. "Better than I expected." "And you move too slowly," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart beat faster than she wished. "You follow like a shadow, but shadows can be broken." He stepped closer, unafraid, yet not threatening. "Perhaps. Or perhaps shadows are the only thing that can follow without being caught." The words hung between them, charged with tension, unspoken challenge, and something deeper neither wished to name. The forest whispered around them, alive with ancient power. The Alpha King felt it too, the subtle pull of magic, the weight of history pressing down. He had faced curses before, sorcery and deceit, but never a force like this. And he knew, somehow, that this Omega was more than she appeared. She was not only a survivor. She was a key, a storm. A spark that could change everything, and yet, despite the danger, he could not look away. The Omega broke the silence. "Why do you follow me?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "Are you a hunter, or something else?" He studied her for a long moment. "I am the Alpha King," he said finally. "And what you have done, it cannot go unanswered. Yet I find myself wanting to understand you more than I wish to punish you." She laughed softly, a sound like wind through the trees. "You think you can understand me? You've destroyed my people! You've hunted me for years, and now you think you can understand?" "I do not think," he said. "I feel. And what I feel is curiosity, respect, perhaps even something I cannot yet name." Her gaze faltered just slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "Curiosity is dangerous," she said. "Especially in someone who commands an army." He smiled faintly, a shadow of warmth in his otherwise dark expression. "So are you," he replied. The night stretched on. Neither moved to strike. Neither would. They were testing each other, circling one another in a dance older than time itself. Predator and prey, Alpha and Omega, power and will, fate and choice. Yet both knew that this was only the beginning. The forest would test them, the night would test them, and the bond forming between them, unspoken, fragile, dangerous, would test them most of all. The Omega finally spoke, voice quiet but firm.
"You will not find me."
"Not here. Not tonight." The Alpha King's eyes darkened, but his voice was calm. "Perhaps. But I will find you. And when I do—" He did not finish the sentence, leaving it hanging like a shadow over the clearing. Her heart beat faster, though she did not show it. He would find her. He always found what he sought. And in that knowledge, a thrill and a warning surged through her alike. She vanished into the darkness, the forest closing around her like a living wall. He watched her go, knowing that the hunt had truly begun, and somewhere, deep in the ancient woods, the wind carried their words, a promise and a challenge whispered between two souls destined to collide. I will find you.
Alive, and you will not escape me.
We shall see, she whispered back to the shadows, already planning her next move. The night was alive with magic, danger, and the unbreakable tension between hunter and hunted. And as the moon climbed higher, both the Omega and the Alpha understood. The game had begun, and neither would walk away unchanged. The forest had grown thicker now, darker, as if the very trees sought to test the Omega's resolve. Moonlight was nearly swallowed by the canopy, leaving only faint silver streaks that danced across her path. She moved silently, each step deliberate, each breath measured. She could feel him. The Alpha King, trailing her, always just beyond her sight, his presence like a shadow she could not escape. She paused beside an ancient tree, its bark carved with symbols older than memory. Her fingers traced the grooves, murmuring the words her mother had taught her. This was not just survival, it was preparation.
A power slept beneath the forest, one that only she could awaken, one that the Alpha King could neither conquer nor command.
And yet, as she whispered the incantations, she felt a pull in the air. The Alpha was closer than she thought, his presence not merely watching but feeling, sensing, responding. It unsettled her, even as it stirred something she could not name.
The Alpha King moved through the shadows with the patience of a predator and the precision of a scholar. He did not follow blindly. He did not rush.
He observed, calculated, and anticipated. Every trap she had set, every path she had taken, he saw, not because the forest revealed it, but because he could feel her essence, her determination, her strength. He remembered the first day he had seen her on the battlefield when she had destroyed half his army. He had been angry then, furious, but as he pursued her now, a new emotion lingered beneath his command. Curiosity, fascination, and an unacknowledged respect. She was more than a threat.
She was a force, a storm, a puzzle he could not yet solve, and he would not stop until he did.
Hours passed, and the forest seemed to shift beneath her feet. Shadows bent unnaturally, paths looped back upon themselves, and whispers, voices older than memory, echoed through the trees. She kept moving, forcing herself to ignore the pull in her chest, the strange curiosity that tugged at her every time she sensed him nearby. Her mind drifted briefly to her past, to the night her clan had fallen.
Flames had swallowed her home, and screams had carved themselves into her memory. She had survived by cunning, by speed, by learning the art of disappearing.
Every step she took now was informed by that night, by that pain, by that loss. Yet beneath the anger, a different feeling stirred, a faint, unwelcome fascination. She hated the thought, but she could not deny it. He intrigued her. The Alpha King, who had destroyed so much, who had caused her grief and fear. He stirred in her a question she did not wish to ask. Why did he follow her, not to strike, but to watch? She reached a small clearing where a pool of water lay still, reflecting the pale moonlight. She knelt at the edge, dipping her fingers into the cold liquid. The surface shimmered and rippled, revealing not just the reflection of the trees above, but images from her past, her family, her clan, the night of fire. She whispered the old words, the words of her ancestors, and the pool glowed faintly. The magic was not strong yet. It needed her strength, her focus, her will, and she could feel it, the forest responding, the energy shifting, waiting for her to command it fully. A sound froze her in place. A soft, deliberate footfall behind her. She spun, dagger raised, and there he was, the Alpha King, dark and commanding, stepping into the clearing as if the shadows themselves carried him. "You awaken more than curiosity," he said quietly, eyes fixed on her. "You awaken power, and perhaps something else, something neither of us can fully control." Her grip on the dagger tightened, yet she did not strike. "You follow me?" she said, her voice low.
You watch me, yet you do not attack. Why? Because I want to understand, he replied. Because I do not yet know if you are enemy or ally, and perhaps because I see in you something I have never seen before.
Her eyes narrowed. "And what is that?" "Strength," he said simply.
Not just of body, but of will, of spirit.
You survive where others would fall. You fight when others would run.
And you challenge me in ways I did not expect.
The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning, charged with unspoken tension. Neither could deny the pull, the magnetic force drawing them together. Even as the world demanded they remain apart. The forest seemed to react, the air thickening with energy. Trees swayed, though no wind blew. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and faint whispers circled around them. It was as though the forest itself recognized the collision of two forces it had long waited for. The Alpha, a ruler forged by conquest, and the Omega, a survivor forged by loss. "You have a secret," he said, stepping closer, though not threateningly. "Something you hide from the world, and perhaps from yourself." She stiffened, heart quickening. "I hide nothing that matters," she replied, though her voice betrayed the truth. There was more than survival at stake. There always had been. "You do," he said softly, reading her as though he could see inside her. "And one day I will uncover it. I will understand what drives you, and perhaps why fate has brought us together." She wanted to run, to vanish into the shadows where he could not follow. And yet, a part of her did not move. It was fear, yes, but also a recognition of something deeper, something she dared not name. They circled each other in the clearing, neither advancing, neither retreating. Words were unnecessary. Their presence, their intent, spoke volumes. She felt his power, not just in strength or command, but in will. He was a ruler, a warrior, a king, and yet in this moment he was more than that. He was challenged by her, intrigued, drawn, perhaps even changed. "You must know," she said finally, voice quieter now, "that if you try to take me, you will fail. Always." He smiled faintly, a shadow of warmth in the silver moonlight. "Perhaps," he said, "but I will not stop trying. You are mine to find." "Alive, and alive you shall remain, if you survive the forest, and yourself." Her eyes flicked toward the shadows, toward the unseen paths that twisted away from the clearing. She could feel the pull of destiny, of power, of challenge. She was no ordinary Omega. She was a force, one that could not be tamed. And yet, for all her strength, she could not ignore the stirring of curiosity in her heart. The Alpha King stepped closer, closing the distance between them, yet not breaking the fragile tension. "The forest itself bends to you," he said.
It is alive with your power, your presence, your will, but it also resists me, and that is why I must follow. I must see. I must understand. You cannot control it," she said. "You cannot control me. I do not wish to control you," he replied. "I only wish to see what you will become." "And perhaps what we might become." The words lingered in the air, charged with tension, unspoken challenge, and dangerous curiosity. Neither could turn away, neither could act freely, for the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, the wind shifted. A distant howl echoed through the trees, chilling and sharp. Both of them froze. Not ordinary wolves, something older, something darker, something tied to the ancient power of the forest. The Omega's eyes widened slightly, but she did not move backward. "It knows me," she whispered. "The forest." "It knows me." He nodded, understanding. "And it will test us. Test both of us. You, your strength and your will. Me, my patience, and my resolve. And together, we may yet face what none have faced before. The forest seemed to hum, the air thick with tension, magic, and promise.
The Omega could feel the pull of her own power, waiting to awaken fully. The Alpha could feel the pull of destiny, guiding him toward her, toward confrontation, toward something neither yet dared name. And then, without warning, a shadow moved among the trees. Not the Alpha, not the Omega, something else. Something older, darker, a force born of the forest's ancient magic, awakened by the collision of Alpha and Omega. It moved fast, silent, and deadly. The Omega's dagger flashed in her hand. The Alpha drew his sword. They moved together, instinctively, back to back, facing a threat neither had seen before. And in that moment, their unspoken bond, their shared tension, their growing respect and curiosity, became a shield. Together they faced the unknown, knowing that the night had only begun, and that the forest and fate would test them far more than they could imagine. The forest trembled under the weight of destiny. Shadows twisted unnaturally, leaves whispered secrets older than time, and a chill wind carried the scent of magic and ancient power. The Omega crouched on a moss-covered rock, her dagger clutched tightly, eyes scanning the darkness. The Alpha King stood nearby, sword drawn, alert, but his gaze was fixed on her, not the shadows. "You feel it too," she said quietly, voice steady but tinged with awe. "The forest. It watches, it waits, it knows what is coming." He nodded, dark eyes narrowing. "I feel it."
But I will not falter. Not now. Not ever. Together they moved through the twisting paths, side by side, not as hunter and hunted, but as allies in a test neither had fully understood.
The forest, alive with ancient magic, was a crucible, a challenge designed to break the weak and forge the strong, and both of them had survived because of willpower, courage, and instinct. The source of the disturbance appeared ahead, a clearing unlike any other. The moonlight poured in from a gap in the canopy, illuminating a circle of stones etched with glowing runes. At the center lay a dark shape, coiled and pulsating with energy. The Omega's breath caught. "The curse," she whispered. "It has awakened." The Alpha King stepped closer, sensing the weight of the magic pressing against them. He had faced armies, monsters, and rebellion, yet this was unlike anything. The air itself seemed to resist him, thick with power and expectation.
"Tell me what to do," he said, voice firm. "I will follow your lead." She hesitated. To awaken the curse fully would be dangerous. It could consume them, destroy the forest, even threaten the kingdom beyond.
But there was no other choice.
"We face it together," she said finally. "You must trust me." "I do," he replied. Eyes dark but steady. "I trust you."
Trust. The word echoed between them, fragile yet powerful. It was the first time either had given it freely, and it changed something in the space between them. The Omega stepped into the circle of stones, chanting the ancient words she had learned from her ancestors. The ground trembled, and the dark mass at the center began to rise, writhing like a living shadow. Its whispers filled the clearing, voices of those long gone, of spirits trapped between worlds.
The Alpha King stood guard, sword ready, yet careful not to interfere. "You must face it," she said to him.
"It tests us. Not just strength, but heart. Not just power, but will."
He watched as the shadows surged, remembering the battlefield, the losses, the years of command and solitude. He realized then that this was not only a test for her, but for him.
Could he protect what he could not control? Could he stand beside someone who challenged him in ways he had never faced before?
The dark mass lunged, a blur of shadow and malice. The Omega moved swiftly, dagger flashing, cutting through the tendrils of dark magic. Sparks of energy flew, illuminating her face, her determination, her fierce will. The Alpha stepped in to protect her when a tendril shot toward her side, parrying with his sword. For the first time they fought together, not Alpha versus Omega, not hunter versus prey, but two forces moving as one, each complementing the other's strength. The shadow shrieked, voices overlapping in a cacophony of old pain. The Omega's voice rose above it, chanting louder, sharper, commanding the magic with precision. "You will not consume us!" she cried. "I am the last of my clan, and we will not be forgotten." The Alpha King's eyes glinted with respect and awe. Her power was extraordinary, born not just of survival but of love, of loss, of unbroken will. And for the first time he felt the weight of his own humanity. Not the weight of a king, but of a man. He struck, parrying and slicing, but also shielding, protecting, trusting her guidance. Together, their movements became a dance of light and shadow, each anticipating the other, each relying on trust they had only begun to build. The shadow writhed, then began to shrink, losing power as the Omega's voice rose, commanding, shaping, bending it to her will. Sweat and frost streaked her face, but she did not falter. The Alpha watched, ready to intervene, but knowing she had to lead this battle. Finally, with a surge of energy, the shadow collapsed, dissolving into sparks that scattered across the stones. Silence fell over the forest, heavy and reverent. The curse was broken, but it left the clearing altered, glowing faintly with the remnants of magic that had endured for centuries. The Omega sank to her knees, exhausted, and the Alpha stepped forward, offering a hand. She looked up at him, hesitated, then took it. The gesture was simple, yet profound. Acknowledgement, trust, and the beginning of something neither had dared imagine. They stood together, breathing in the calm after the storm. The forest seemed to sigh, the tension lifting, replaced by a gentle luminescence. The Alpha King regarded her with a mixture of respect, admiration, and something deeper. Something that had grown over the nights of pursuit, over the trials of the forest, over the moments of quiet and danger shared between them. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "Not just for what you can do, but for who you are." Her eyes softened, a faint smile touching her lips. "And you are more than I imagined. Strong, yes, but also capable of trust, of restraint, of understanding." For a long moment, silence spoke louder than words. They had faced death, magic, and fate itself, and survived, together. The forest was quiet, but the world beyond waited. They knew their journey was not over. Kingdoms would speak of the Alpha King and the Omega who had defied him. Enemies would rise. Power would always test them. But in this moment they had found something stronger than fear, stronger than vengeance, stronger than power itself, mutual respect, trust, and the unspoken bond that had grown in shadow and trial. The Alpha King lowered his sword, sheath in hand, and stepped closer. "Whatever comes," he said, voice steady, "we face it together." The Omega nodded, feeling the weight of their shared experiences settle between them. "Together," she echoed. And in that word the forest seemed to glow brighter, as if acknowledging a bond that fate had woven long ago, a bond neither conquest nor curse could break. As they began the journey back through the forest, side by side, the Alpha King glanced at her. "You have changed me," he admitted softly. "Not by force, not by battle, but by who you are, by what you endure, by what you inspire." She looked at him, her eyes steady and strong. "And you have changed me. By your presence, your resolve, your willingness to stand with me. Not over me, with me." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. They had been enemies, hunters, survivors, and now they were partners, bound by trust and by the trials of fate. The forest gradually gave way to the edge of the mountains, where the first light of dawn painted the sky with gold and violet. The battlefield they had left behind seemed distant, almost unreal. Yet they carried it with them, not as a wound, but as proof of endurance, of survival, and of connection. The Omega paused at the edge of the trees, looking back at the forest that had tested her and the Alpha alike. "This place will always be part of us," she said quietly. "It will," he replied, "and so will this moment. And perhaps
we will be stronger for it.
Their hands brushed a silent promise that whatever came next, throne, kingdom, destiny, they would face it together.
And in that simple gesture, the story of Hunter and Hunted, Alpha and Omega, came to a temporary rest, though the echoes of their journey would ripple through the world for years to come. As the sun rose, they stepped out of the forest, side by side. Their hearts beat in quiet harmony, their minds alive with the lessons learned and the trust earned. The Alpha King, feared by all, had discovered humility and respect.
The Omega, tested and scarred, had discovered not just her own power, but the strength of shared trust. And though the kingdom beyond awaited them with challenges, with enemies, with the weight of rulership, they had faced the impossible together, emerging not only alive, but changed. For the first time in years, the forest behind them was silent, not with fear, but with acknowledgement. It had seen two forces collide, test each other, and survive.
It had seen trust and courage triumph over vengeance and fear, and in that moment the Alpha King and the Omega understood something neither had fully realized before. Power alone does not define a ruler, nor survival alone define a warrior.
Only connection, trust, and shared purpose could shape destiny, and in each other they had found both.